Okay, hey, let me close that out. All right. So I promised in my previous video that I was going to talk about the extent to which groupthink affected me, or places where I could at least identify it in my own mentality and the way that I think. And I don't get a lot of group interaction personally. I don't get much social interaction, honestly. But I mean, there are definitely places where I could find it potentially. Um, when I was very young, a child, really, I started watching the Amazing Atheists videos on YouTube, um, and that was it was very impactful for me because um, I suppose one could argue that I was impressionable. I think the appeal was more. I, it seemed to me more commiseration than persuasion, honestly. Because when I was a child, I had already independently begun to question religion, and and when I saw some of his videos and his critiques on society, it really felt like the same kinds of things I was already experiencing. The same kinds of things um, I had already discerned about society. Which I suppose that's really where groupthink comes from. So I shouldn't be surprised if I do suffer from some level of groupthink as a result. When multiple people share common good ideas and form groups based off of those common good ideas, groupthink, I think, to some extent is inevitable, really. Um, Especially if you become insular and you get all of your facts and opinions and information from that group. Um, I think if groupthink's affected me in any kind of way, it's made me perhaps less patient to when it comes to um, feminist articles and propaganda. More makes it more of a chore. Like, I have to read through it, even though I disagree with it, to discern, the merit, the level of believability, and the likelihood that their argument is quote unquote true. Um, the extent to which it mirrors reality, that sort of thing. So, um, you know, d- does my level of association with the group prevent me from acknowledging when feminists make valid points? Uh, does it prevent me from if feminists were generally right in their assertions, would I be less able to see how they were right because of my affinity for the group that says they're wrong? Um, it's conceivable. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's impossible. I I hear arguments from feminists to a large extent through um, through the I hesitate to call them anti-feminists because mean, it's just it. I mean, they really don't form much of a group or an association, really. At least not the ones that I watch. I watch some Sargon, some Teal Deer. I mean, they reference each other every now and then. You know, um, some other people like that. I mean, I suppose it's a loose kind of group. Undoomed as well. Yeah, it's a loose association of individuals, I suppose. I've never felt that it was much of a group, other than they are a group of people whose videos I frequent and who occasionally will reference each other and who will generally hold similar views, although they will occasionally disagree on a few things, um, like minor points. Does the extent to which I am persuaded by the things that they have to say color my ability to believe in the feminist narrative that women, even in first world societies, first world countries, are oppressed? That these tiny nitpicking things here and there build up to form a sort of greater oppression. Um, I mean, obviously, the best answer I'm going to be able to come up with here is maybe. Um, I can always, provide, counter arguments and examples. I can always, try to find facts and figures and present logical arguments for why something is wrong, why it's not just, my belief that it's wrong, that objective reality backs me up. And I suppose that for me is the appeal of using, facts and figures and fact checking, because since I was a little boy, right, I've always had this fear that, if you go too deep down the rabbit hole, if you get too far away from other people, you'll eventually kind of lose your touch with reality, right? Which, ironically, here I'm presenting that that's actually the opposite of the case, but bear with me. And I've always sought to try to counter that. Like my quest for truth is also an effort to make sure that I'm not crazy, essentially. Right? And and I suppose that's the appeal of not only stats and figures and facts, but also the how. Like how are those figures obtained? Were they obtained in a way that would accurately present a strong and reasonable case? And how do I define reasonable? How do I define rational? You have to deal with ambiguity. You have to deal with ambivalence. You have to realize that the same people who can be right about one thing can be wrong about another. I've recently had to struggle lately with the fact that not everyone whose profession technically is scientist is necessarily qualified to talk about everything or to be the arbiter of objective truth, and even the profession of scientist doesn't excuse someone of the need to provide strong logical arguments supported by many observations, lots of data and evidence. And I don't think anyone ever said that wasn't the case. I mean, I think everyone would agree that such is the case, that that the profession of scientist really is about, obtaining that kind of information and presenting it. But I've always had a sort of fantasized love of science. So there's a tendency for me to want to believe that scientists are necessarily qualified to inform on almost any subject, and really it's not the person that is the scientist who garners the authority. It's the information that they obtain. It's the study that they do, the data that they collect, that has the authority, not the individual, not the person. If Albert Einstein came up to you and told you that the sky was purple, like, yes, he's a brilliant man, he's a genius and an authority figure, but what he says doesn't matter. It's the math that he does, it's the data that he collects, it's the information that he provides. Now, that's not to say that being a scientist doesn't give you sort of extra authority, doesn't make you an authority on a subject, right? The subject that you study. But I don't think it makes you an authority to speak on the subject more than it does make you an authority to provide the data, and for us to believe that the data is valid and believable. And not that we as individuals shouldn't double check and make sure, but there's so much information out there. It's easy to just assume that a doctor's name is on this study, is on this research, and that means that I can quote it as much as I want and not have to worry about its validity, not have to worry about its accuracy. It's certainly easier that way, and sometimes you just don't have any reason to question it because of the things that you need it for. You're not in a serious debate or anything. You just I don't know what situation I'm even talking about that doesn't require that kind of double checking, but and you don't have to run your own particle accelerator in order to believe that the complicated physics work behind the stuff that they're doing at CERN labs means what they say it means. You just believe it because they're physicists and they would know. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. That's absolutely crucial. That's why we have the division of scientific fields, is so that no one person has to be super well informed on every single subject of science. It doesn't have to conduct every test that's ever been performed again to make sure that it's valid. But from time to time, it is essential that if you want to be sure of your case, you need to double check the facts, double check what you're reading. Make sure that that's valid. So yeah, I said that to say this. There are groups of people that it's naturally easier for me to believe, and I'm shocked when their interpretations are shown to be invalid in any way. I think people like Sargon, Teal'c, etc. There are a few things that they say that I would disagree with. Generally, they make very strong, compelling points, and I'm persuaded by what they have to say, by the information that they provide, by the citations that they provide on their videos. I find that very compelling. Their argument's compelling. So I guess it's the only way that I'm really protected from any sort of groupthink is by being able to fall back on that, by being able to say, it's not that we share this common belief that feminism is ruining everything, and we just sit in an echo chamber and I just listen to nothing but them all day long and become so wrapped up in it that becomes the lens through which I see the world. I don't just believe everything that they say, or I try not to. It's something I think you kind of have to actively work towards sometimes, is building up a notion of reality and then breaking it down again to make sure that it's working properly. It's a bit paranoid, but you never can be too careful with that sort of thing. It's kind of maddening from time to time, but you can never be too careful when it comes to objective truth, because you could always be wrong. Anything you could say, anything you ever say or have ever said, you could always be wrong. I like to tell people, when asked what I believe, I like to tell people I don't believe in anything. I don't believe anything. Not even the stuff that seems really obvious. Not like, does this pen exist? I would say it seems to exist. Yeah, it looks like it exists. I would say that sure, it exists. Do I believe that it exists? No, I'm not going to say that's 100% sure. I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't know. I'm not going to not react to it. It's obviously it's something that I can feel, that I can see, that I can touch, and if I put it in my mouth, I could even taste it. And if I click it, then I can hear it. Right? I have to react to it because it's sensory data. Whether it's real or not, it's part of the world in which I live, apparently. So it's not contingent upon my belief in it. I don't have to believe that the pen exists in order to react to it as part of my everyday reality. I don't have to believe anything that the anti-feminists or the atheists or anyone like that. I don't have to believe what they say, and I don't believe what they say. I'm persuaded, compelled by their arguments, but not into belief. Just it's case by case basis. Situational, Some specific feminist woman said blah blah, and that was wrong because facts. That was wrong because this report, this statistic that was conducted by a group with this level of authority, da 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 da, ipso facto, therefore you're wrong. Yeah. So I don't know. The point of this video isn't that I'm not affected by groupthink. I'm sure that it affects me. It affects everybody. That everyone interacts with groups. Everyone can be affected by some extent. Groupthink to some extent. It's not. It's more of a spectrum, I think. The degree to which it affects you. If you're living in a cabin in the middle of the woods, obviously 0%. The only group that can affect the way you think is the squirrels, and they don't talk much, depending on what you hallucinate. But yeah, I'm rambling. Yeah, I'm aware. I'm aware. I know I said this in my previous videos, but I'm still trying to get used to talking in front of the camera. It's not good for me, man. But but yeah, I'm sure that it affects me. I'm sure that listening to people that generally share approximately the same view naturally inclines me to be less patient, less tolerant of the feminist perspective, simply because it's it's an argument that I hear. I hear so many feminists making these arguments that are easily debunked, and it creates this worldview for me. In my mind, it creates this perception of feminism as being flimsy, something that's easily debunked, something that the people who participate don't make valid arguments, and aren't very mentally competent, and and obviously that doesn't apply to all feminists. My one of my longest friends that I've had since I was a child, she's been a feminist for a long time, and in fact, I think she is actually the way that she does feminism is not something that I'm even opposed to. So I guess I have to say, I'm not, like, if someone uses the word feminist to describe themselves, I'm not automatically against them, but it does set up certain expectations of the way that they will behave and the things that they will say, and I suppose that's the way that groupthink's affected me, is that these people that share generally the same ideas, they keep demonstrating time and time again how easily feminist arguments are debunked, and it builds up this expectation that if someone says that they're a feminist, they're going to make a certain kind of argument, or they're going to rely on a certain type of fallacy or certain types of fallacies, and they're going to say things that are invalid, and I have to be careful that I don't just automatically assume that. I have to be careful and make sure that it's not just that they're a feminist, it's that I've looked into what they've said, I've examined it, I've broken down the argument into its essential form and the content within that form, and I've double checked the content, and I've analyzed the form, and everything checks out or doesn't based on what that individual person is saying, right? But still, that said, now that I've recognized how groupthink affects me, I think there is an important message to get out here, which is that feminism as a movement is not just in jeopardy. It is currently going completely off the fucking rails, and I think the reason for that is largely groupthink. I think people hear something that sounds so good that they don't bother to question the everything that goes with that. Everything that goes with that philosophy, because the first thing was okay. I've already talked about this in my previous video, so I won't go over it again right now. I'm gonna save that for a different video, because clearly I'm going to need to really elaborate. I'm gonna need to get some videos of some feminists speaking or protesting, and highlight the specific things that they do and their connection to groupthink to really illustrate what I'm trying to get across. But I think it is important to analyze for us, me and you as the audience, to go over it together and see what it is that I'm talking about, see the way that affects feminists, and hopefully, if you are a feminist, to cause you to question, to cause you to turn inward and think, okay, if groupthink affects everybody, what effect is it having on me? What what are the things that I believe as they concern feminism, and how have those beliefs perhaps been informed by groupthink? How has being given a certain message by my group colored my perception of reality? How do I see the world that other people disagree with my perception of what the world is on a fundamental level, on a level so deep that it literally seems like we must be talking about two separate earths, two separate realities, and how has groupthink affected my version of reality? Because it's really, again, it's not a matter of if it's happened. It's a matter of to what extent. And I'm sure we could debate the extent, but I think the first step is just to clarify that it is definitely taking place. That said, I'm going to bring this video to a close. Hope you guys have a wonderful day.